Okay, we had to take a look at it. All right, this is they reached a verdict. All right, we're gonna be comparing Caysen Allison, trial and verdict case that occurred in Bell County, a county in Texas, to the Karmelo Anthony trial, which is undergoing right now, that also occurred in Collin County in Texas. These two counties about 2 hours apart from each other. All right, these two very similar cases. We're gonna put them under the lens and find out, how they compare and how the Karmelo Anthony trial is going to proceed now that a verdict has been reached in the Caysen Allison trial, which in the Caysen Allison trial and case, they reached a verdict. All right, he was being charged with murder, first degree murder, for going into a high school bathroom, stabbing and killing Joe Ramirez, who was around 17 years old, a high school student at Belmont High School. All right, this is being compared to Karmelo Anthony's case. He's being charged with first degree murder for stabbing and killing Austin Metcalf, not on a high school premise, but on a public track and field, space, an outdoor event. So, in this trial, as you can see right there, Karmelo Anthony's being charged with killing Austin Metcalf. Caysen Allison, they reached a verdict in this trial recently, within the past week. Instead of being he was charged with murder. He's being found guilty of criminally negligent homicide. All right, this guilty verdict charge has a much less, sentence. It's a lesser charge, far lesser charge than murder or first degree murder. It carries a prison sentence of 6 months to 2 years. All right, this dude can do it at the least 6 months for following through, killing somebody in a high school bathroom, Joe Ramirez, a Hispanic kid. This is going to be interesting. This case in another county, not too far, about a couple of hours away from the county where the Austin Metcalf stabbing occurred. All right, it's going to be how this case, the verdict that was reached in this case, affects the Karmelo Anthony case is going to be interesting. All right, because first of all, you have the parents of the kid that was murdered in Bell County by Caysen Allison. His parents came in distraught, all right, crying. Their kid was murdered by this kid. I don't know the back story to what led up to this event, whether it was some conflict, some bullying going on, who knows what. Nobody deserved to die. Somebody did die. Somebody was stabbed and somebody was killed. Caysen Allison, what it sounds like is nobody forced him basically to go into this high school bathroom, seek out Joe Ramirez, and stab and kill him. That is exactly what he did. And after he did the act, left the bathroom, left the scene, discarded the knife, and tried to get away until the cops caught up with him. Okay. You compare that. Now, he was being charged with murder. With first degree murder is what it sounds like. It sounds like something that was premeditated. Sounds like something that, first degree murder, it carries with it an intention, a plan by the suspect to go in and commit murder against somebody. And that's what it sounds like. What happened in Caysen Allison's case. All right, he was charged with that. Wasn't found guilty of that. Found guilty of a much lesser charge, criminally negligent homicide. At the most, he could serve 2 years in prison. On the flip side, Karmelo Anthony is being charged with first degree murder. This type of charge, if found guilty, the judge and jury reaches a verdict and finds Karmelo Anthony guilty of this. He could face up to life in prison, only being eligible for parole after 40 years. Okay? It's the difference in this case. Very big difference. If the judge and jury reaches a verdict in this case to where they charge Carmelo Anthony or they find him guilty of what he's being charged with, man, this is gonna create some type of uproar in the state of Texas. I mean, how could it not? These two similar cases, I mean, they are similar as in the basically in the facts that both suspects had a knife on them. One suspect had a knife on him while he was on the school grounds of a high school premises. He had a knife on him, went into a bathroom, and murdered another student. All right, Carmelo Anthony, in this case, he had a knife on him. This was a public space, track and field event outside of a school premises. The event may have been tied to a school event. It may have been a third party event that was being hosted outside of the school district. However, this was a public place. He had a knife on him. Very different circumstances of what led him to being in close proximity to Mr. Austin Metcalf, in that it's an outdoors event and it's raining. There's inclement weather going on, right? It's inclement weather. He's walking onto the track and field space. It's raining. It's pouring down rain. As a convenience, as to try to find shelter from the rain, he decides to go up under the tent where Austin Metcalf is. Doesn't sound like he's intentionally looking for Austin Metcalf, opposed to how Caysen Allison went into the high school bathroom. It appears like he was intentionally looking for Joe Ramirez. In the case of Carmelo Anthony, he went up under this tent to try to evade, get out of the rain, find shelter from the rain. All right, while he was under the tent, gets approached by Austin Metcalf and maybe somebody else. They start taunting him, start bullying him, as teenagers do. And it was like, hey, you don't belong under this tent. What are you doing under this tent? Move around. You got to get out of here. I can imagine Carmelo Anthony's pleading his case and say, hey, man, I'm not moving right now. I'm not leaving right now. It's raining outside. It's pouring down rain. I don't have an umbrella. Probably didn't have an umbrella. I need to stay under this tent until the rain passes, and then I'll be on my merry way. Austin Metcalf, whoever he's with, didn't feel like hearing any of that. They go back and forth. It's more believable that Austin Metcalf, being that Carmelo Anthony appears that he's kind of by himself in a tent, where Austin Metcalf's probably surrounded by his peers, people he knows, and people that associate with him, rather than Carmelo Anthony. All right, Carmelo Anthony's under that tent by himself, and so Austin Metcalf proceeds to taunt him, to bully him, was what it sounds like. Probably shoved him, probably threw the first punch, things like that. Probably jumped on him, and in an act of self-defense, he proceeds to stab Austin Metcalf. Now, if I'm a person on that jury, I would look at this case more so as a case of criminally negligent homicide. I would convince my juror, peers, that we need to look at this case the same way, that the jurors and the judge looked at the Caysen Allison case and came to the verdict of criminally negligent homicide, because that's exactly what this case sounds like in Austin Metcalf's case. All right, in the Carmelo Anthony situation, it sounds like criminally negligent homicide, to where he didn't go up under that tent with the intent, with a premeditation to murder or do anything to Austin Metcalf. He was approached by Austin Metcalf and probably some other people in a situation to where he felt like his life was in danger, his safety, his well-being was in danger, and he responded to that. All right, not knowing that Mr. Metcalf was going to lose his life after that. Okay, very different from the situation that probably played out between Caysen Allison and Joe Ramirez in that high school bathroom. How that jury could reach a verdict, of Caysen Allison being found guilty of criminally negligent homicide opposed to murder or first degree murder, man, we got to question that. You know, we got to question that. Of course, race is going to play an issue anywhere inside of this country. Race is going to play an issue when it comes to these cases. Maybe we're talking about this case because of the race issue, but the race issue in the Caysen Allison case, you're looking at what looks like, Caucasian, your kid of European descent, some type of European descent, something like that, against another person of Hispanic, Latino ethnicity. All right, which that is Joe Ramirez. Caysen Allison is more of European descent. Joe Ramirez may have identified as Caucasian or white as well, but with Hispanic and Latino ethnicity. All right. This case you don't really hear about. The Caysen Allison case, didn't really hear too much about. You really have to go search for it when you put in the Google search. When you type in, Texas team fatally stabbed another Texas team in a high school event, you're gonna see the Karmelo Anthony case in the first 5 pages before you see anything about the Caysen Allison case. But this is very interesting. I just wanted to touch on this and put it under the lens and give my perspective on it. And I'll be keeping up with the Karmelo Anthony case trial as it plays out.